Hello, everybody, and we're very excited for you guys to join us today. The first step is the information, and so hopefully after this, you'll be able to answer any questions that you may have, and we can see your submissions coming in. Our deadline is the 28th of April, so let's get that in there. So first, kind of hitting on what is RPI. So RPI is a nonprofit association that provides access to the best practice standards, education, research, and the exchange of ideas around the topic of recognition. As advocates for positive employee experiences, we foster engagement, we share best practices, and we provide tools, strategies, and thoughtful leadership and education through different kinds of certifications as well. We are big advocates of recognition. It is our lives. And then we have multiple different options for awards. Our first ones would be our RPI Pinnacle Award, which is when you submit for all 7 of our best practice standards. You can also submit for just one of the best standards at a time if you would like, and earn one of our RPI Best Practice Standard Award. Or you could also go for our RPI Achievement Award, which is if you submit for all 7 awards within 3 years, you'll have those kind of ones as well. And so on our standards, we have RPI recognizes 7 standards that we award through our different way of promoting the best kinds of recognitions that we can offer. While we will go into detail for every one of these standards, I will just kind of hit them as an overview of standard 1 is our recognition strategy, standard 2, management responsibility, standard 3, recognition program measurement, standard 4, communication plan, standard 5, recognition training, standard 6, recognition events and celebrations, and standard 7, program and flexibility. So now that you kind of have a basis of what kind of awards we have available, we were going to go right into the different kinds of standard awards as they are individually, which we will start with Kevin.
Hi, that's great. Megan, are you moving the slides on? Yeah, if you would. We need to go down a couple more slides. That's it. Keep going.
Yep, sorry about that.
There we go. There we go. Okay, thank you. That's great. So hi, everybody. Yep. So the standard 1 is about demonstrating that you have a definitive recognition strategy. It's obviously starting with the end in mind, really important part of any recognition program. So the point is to start with and have clear objectives. So is that all about that, starting with the end in mind. Aligning with the organizational culture, the culture with the strategy is critical. The people need to be aligned with the plan. So again, your submission needs to demonstrate that alignment has happened in your strategy. Getting more practical, a good recognition strategy sort of is a 3-dimensional sort of approach from formal, or let's say the other way around, from informal, everyday, always on recognition, all the way up to those pinnacle events, those celebrations of recognition. So you need to be able to demonstrate that ideally in your submission. And then the day-to-day peer-to-peer recognition as well. How does that work? So a plan, a strategy that demonstrates all of these things and documented. And then the procedures and the processes and the technologies that are used to deliver those various types of recognition. How do you do it? So it's the what and the how. So Meg, if you don't mind moving on a slide, if you can. So here, these slides here, just around strategy, just a little bit of sort of an example of our own submission. So we are very committed to the alignment model, and the alignment model literally does demonstrate that you're looking to create a culture that supports the strategy. And how do you create that culture? Well, you recognize values, people for carrying out best practices and exhibiting the right behaviors. And then on the other side of the model, performance-based recognition, which is about recognizing people for achieving the goals, objectives, and activities. And then getting into the more kind of operational side of your plan, of your strategy. The pyramid, we like the pyramid. It kind of demonstrates all of the different tiers of recognition in our program, from social recognition that I spoke about, where a lot of people in the business are being touched on a weekly basis by it, that peer-to-peer sort of recognition. Then performance recognition and reward. So we layer in some rewards there at the next level up, and we'd be looking at about 50% of our people to be on the receiving end of that sort of recognition on a monthly basis. And then celebrations and events and the pinnacle awards that I spoke about earlier. So starting informal, getting up to formal. And then in our case, the whole program is enabled by a technology platform. It's our own technology platform, but I think in this space, you would start to talk about that enabling technology in your submission. How are you making it happen? So that's standard one. I'll hand over to Janet to pick up on the management responsibility side of a good program.
Thanks, Kevin, and good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. And I'm here to talk about management responsibility and hopefully provide you some examples from TD Bank Group. So at a high level, these are the standards for Standard 2 that RPI really wants every organization to detail. It really starts with senior leaders, right, in every organization. And, it's up to you to really describe how the vision and strategy objectives for your organization really get sponsored by your senior leaders. So as Kevin mentioned around the strategy, how does the management responsibility feed into that? Of course, in every organization, there needs to be champions to support resourcing and budgets for all recognition programs underneath the strategy. So you'll need to describe that as well. And ultimately, managers need to be held accountable for good recognition practices and habits. So how does your organization take care of that? And in terms of communications and education and training, all of those pieces in terms of management responsibilities for those need to be described. So on the next slide, Megan, if you wouldn't mind, this is an excerpt from our submission last year. And it really, on this slide, talks about TD's perspective. And what I can tell you is overall, recognition has always been very important at TD Bank in terms of supporting our vision, purpose, and shared commitments. And the executive support, of course, is essential to that success. As Kevin mentioned about the strategy, what I tried to develop here in our submission is the link of our strategy, which has been refreshed to be more of an integrated approach to both recognition and appreciation. And so I did some due diligence around management responsibility on how it links to strategy. So that would be a pointer I would give to any one of you that, strategy really starts first. And that's why I think it is standard 1, and then everything kind of dovetails from there. In terms of the next slide, what I want to talk about a little bit is to give you a sense of TD's management responsibility when it comes to, the recognition strategy and their responsibility around it. What we tried to get the essence across in our submission last year was the senior leadership is vital, right? Because at the end of the day, it's our senior leaders and our executives that lead the strategy, lead the planning of any sort of either enterprise recognition programs or business specific programs. And in TD, we do that in a number of different ways. We have what we call an executive steering committee, and they typically meet semi-annually. And these are kind of heads of each business across TD Bank. And we're very large, right? Like we're over 100,000 employees. We've got multiple lines of businesses, multiple jurisdictions. So depending on the complexity of your organization, you'll have to map that out. But what what I did map out was all the governance structures around TD Bank and the management responsibility in each. We also have over and above the, like underneath the executive steering committee, we have what's called our executive task force, and those are more at the VP level across all of our lines of business. And we meet with them quarterly, and we meet with them quarterly to review the progress on our recognition strategic objectives, review any sort of changes we want to move forward. And we even talk about our annual recognition events, which we'll get to in a little bit. We also have on the ground kind of what I call our R&R council and our R&R community of practices, where we've got people that are accountable from a management responsibility perspective to plan various recognition activities and events throughout the year. And of course, you know, we wouldn't be without, you know, actually having all people managers walk and talk recognition and appreciation. So we actually built in and have built in a competency model for all of our people managers, and recognition and appreciation in terms of their accountability is pivotal. And last but not least, we have what we call our TD Pulse survey. And once a year, we go out and ask our people managers across the bank and all 100,000 colleagues, how is recognition and appreciation resonating within your business? It's up to actually the people managers to take the responses from that annual survey and to actually action plan. So I would say, you know, from a management responsibility perspective, my advice and counsel to everyone is, if you can disseminate whatever your structure is within your organization, from the top senior executives all the way down to, you know, the grassroots people manager level, you'll have it covered. So I hope that helps. And back to you, Kevin, to explain standard 3.
Thanks, Janet. Thank you. Great. Okay, so program measurement, absolutely critical in any successful program. How are we measuring the effectiveness of our recognition and reward program? We intuitively know that recognition is good. We know that engagement is good, but can we demonstrate that? And I think for the RPI, they want to see how you're doing that. How are you measuring your program? So it's not just the qualitative side. How do people feel about it? But it's also some quantitative data as well. So we need to look at the qual and the quant side of things. And it's evaluating the effectiveness of recognition sort of through the eyes of the employees. That's the qualitative side, but also in terms of achieving some of those objectives that you've defined in your strategy, and creating a clear framework of how you're going to measure the program. And ultimately, that sort of ultimate measure, the third bullet point there, is around demonstrating the return on investment from your program, if you're able to do that. It gets progressively more challenging, I think, as you sort of go up the tiers of measurement, but being able to demonstrate to your senior leaders, Janet talked a lot about sort of engaging with those senior leaders, getting them on side. They'll want to see some sort of return. So how do you demonstrate that to the RPI that you've put a framework in place? So Meg, if you don't mind just shifting on up, got a slide which kind of just demonstrates how we approach it at Achievement Awards Group, which is a framework that I particularly like. And we measure our program at 4 different levels, getting progressively more objective and more quantitative as we go up the scale. So bottom left, participant satisfaction. You know, how do people feel about it? What are they saying about it? To what extent do they like it? That's some sort of measure in terms of how well we're doing. Secondly, program engagement. Are they actually engaged in our recognition program? What sort of data do we have that says yes, they like it, but they are actually engaged? Are they recognizing others? Are they signing in? Are they socially active? Are they using their reward budgets appropriately? So how, to what extent are people engaged? That's a useful measure to look at. And then going up to level 3, we're starting to get into the more behavioral sort of side of things, slightly harder to measure, but employee engagement. Are we seeing a movement in those sort of metrics? You know, do we have an employee engagement or an employee experience measure? Do we measure that on an annual basis? And are we seeing that needle move as a result of our program? So that's a useful measure to report on and keep track of. And then finally, the level 4 stuff, the ultimate, the business impact. I think in our case, there's certain areas of the business where that's easier to measure than others. In our call center, for example, it's a highly measured part of our business, and we can track improvements in quality, improvements of attendance, improvements in staff retention, and all of those things. So the more kind of definitive and objective you can be at that level, I think the stronger your submission will be around measurement. And I think just last thing I might just mention, any sort of sound bites you can get from your people from surveys you may have taken where they're endorsing or otherwise your program. I think those are worth adding in as well. So that's standard 3. Back to Janet for standard 4, communications.
Thanks, Kevin. And yeah, I want to talk a little bit more in detail about the communication plan for your organization. And, just thinking about that graphic there, Kevin, I mean, that's one of the tactics that I think potentially organizations may either leverage in their organization or could leverage as part of communication plans. So let's just do a little bit of a deeper dive here. In terms of RPI, what they're looking for is, that next step is you've got a program, you've got a strategy. How do you plan to communicate it across your organization? They want to see a well-articulated plan. They want to see, a lot of details around the end-to-end in terms of communication plan. And, some organizations, like the second bullet refers to, is there a calendar? Is there some sequential rollout through various channels and through timing to make sure, different parts of the organization are touched from the communication rollout. And bullet 3, RPI wants you to articulate what are those various tools and resources that you use to assist, whether it be executives, managers, employee groups, using and learning about recognition through communication. So it's a whole holistic side from strategy on your communication all the way down to tactics. I'll give you a few examples on the TD side. And I wanted to say, for any appreciation or recognition initiative, whether it's a large scale change in the bank or whether it be kind of a smaller, more unique kind of feature that we're trying to launch or program that we're trying to launch, communication is so pivotal to us. And it's important that, each stakeholder is really engaged in the communication plan. I would say on the TD side, because we're so large, we actually do a lot of partnership with our corporate and public affairs. We call them CAPA. They really look both internally to the colleague side of communication as well as externally. So most of the time we focus internally, of course, but I'll give you an example when we actually look at external, because I think having that broadness, as I said, end-to-end approach to communication is important to articulate to RPI through this submission process. And depending on your organization and how you do that, will dictate. But what I can tell you is in terms of our plan, every communication plan, we always are clear in terms of what are our objectives, what are those goals that you want to meet, what are those key audiences that you need to make sure are engaged in those communications, what are those various tactics that you'll need to roll out through the course of time to make sure that those audiences and those objectives are met. And then ultimately, I know on the TD side, having some key messages are so important because we want to make sure, organizationally that everyone is clear in terms of why we're doing what we're doing, how we're doing it, and how it's going to impact. To Kevin's point, how are we engaging from an employee perspective? Are we trying to increase, our return on investment and communication? The communication plan will definitely help with that. I know within most organizations, there's various communication vehicles that you can leverage. And I know TD has a lot of different communication vehicles, and we have a lot of tools and resources. And so some of the things that we articulated in our submissions were giving examples of various tools, whether it be our intranet site, whether it be, we have like what we call an employee news feed. And so anything that is hitting every employee across the bank or within certain businesses, we post recognition program or announcements or stories. We love to do storytelling. I think from a communication strategy perspective, we really take pride in trying to make it real for people. And of course, recognition and appreciation, elicits some really good positive vibes across the organization. So the more compelling story we can tell, the better. We leverage lots of collaboration tools across the bank, including in our key platform. We have what's called a Wall of Fame. And so anybody who receives recognition, who wants it, and doesn't gives us permission to promote it publicly, we do. And so there's a way to go and see various people that you follow and like and comment on the recognition that they've received. We also, from a people manager perspective, we actually have People Manager Tuesday communications. So any sort of interesting tidbits, as I mentioned, whether it be PM competency models, whether it be a launch of a new recognition program or initiative, we go through our PM Tuesday. And then we have various videos. We've even got like leadership lounges and other external social media I was mentioning, where, anytime we're going out with a program that we want our external investors to know about, we post it there as well. And that's all leveraged through our great partnership with our Kappa team. So I hope that helps. And back to you, Kevin.
Thanks, Janet. Thank you very much. So yeah, we're on standard 5. Standard 5 is around recognition training, a little bit like communication. Successful programs need your ongoing communication, needs a communication strategy. Equally, you need to train the various levels of stakeholders in the process as well. I'd say it's training with a small t. It's not complicated training, but it needs to be done, particularly at launch. I think that's what, and I think in terms of your submissions, if you are submitting for this particular standard, or whether you're going for the Pinnacle Award with all of the standards, then you need to talk about the training that you've implemented and the way you train people around your program. So so the various levels of training, I guess, ideally, that you need to be able to demonstrate. Firstly is the training around how to effectively use the various online recognition and reward programs you have, how to use your technology. I like to think of it as that familiarization training around the platform that you might be using. You don't want any friction in the system. You want people to feel confident in using the platform. You don't want that to be a barrier to them engaging. So how do you ensure that people are confident using your technology, using your platform? It's not complicated, as I say, but it needs to be considered and done. So next level down, education and training on recognition principles and effective behaviors associated with giving meaningful recognition. Again, are you doing that in your business? Have you particularly engaged with your management level, your line management level, in terms of how to give best practice recognition, to be on the lookout for opportunities to appreciate people, and then to deliver it in the right sort of way? How do you do that? Is it sort of via digital learning, e-learning, or do you get people face to face? But you need to articulate how you might do that. Something that quite often gets overlooked is, once you've launched the program and you've delivered some training, how do you orientate those new employees coming in? They need to be engaged with quickly. They need to understand the program, what it's about. They need to be able to use the platform. They need to know what's in it for them. So that onboarding of new employees is their piece of recognition and reward program training built into your onboarding process. And then again, if your submission will be stronger if you're able to articulate how you collect that learning data, who's been trained, have they got the key messages, do they understand what they're doing? So that measurement piece around your learning programs would strengthen your submission. So that's the top line sort of training piece. Here's some examples of collateral that we used in our submission. We did have a documented training plan that covered sort of pre-launch training through launch and then the post-launch onboarding. And that was, we defined who the key people were, the key messages, and how many, etc., and how we delivered that. So that was a piece of collateral that we used in our submission. We took a screen grab from we do have actually a manager, a best practice recognition program, an e-learning program for our managers. And top right there is a screen grab from that e-learning. It's a video-based program, and it demonstrated that we weren't just talking about it. We actually delivered on that dimension of training, and then to wrap it all off, that sort of that certificate of accomplishment. So some collateral to support your submission around what you do for recognition training. Thanks, Meg. Just back to Janet to talk events and celebrations, the fun bit, the champagne and the streamers.
Thanks, and we have a lot of that in TD. Yeah, so in terms of recognition events and celebrations, RPI is looking for, the policies and procedures that exist for all events and celebrations. And I'll talk about TDs specifically in a moment, because this one was a little bit hard for me to articulate because we were just kind of coming out of COVID. And we take pride in having a number of events and celebrations. So we went through COVID actually looking at all of our policies and procedures, and I'll explain kind of the governance around that. But whatever your policy and procedures within your organization, just make sure you're clear what those are. Budgets obviously are always top of mind when it comes to events. They can get quite expensive. So what sort of controls are you putting in place, or have you already got in place around your budgets, and how are they aligned ultimately with your recognition strategy that Kevin talked initially about? And then again, we can't forget about measurements. So how, knowing especially how expensive recognition events can be, what's the ROI, or what's the measures that you're putting in place to ensure there is success at the end of the day. And then I know TD takes pride in making sure that leadership is so pivotal in terms of their participation and not just their participation, but what they and the employees are going to gain out of a recognition event. And so make sure that you're clear on the key stakeholders that attend these events, what their role and what the outcomes are. And there's always a process improvement side to events. I think there's always new learnings depending on how you celebrate, where you celebrate, who attends, etc. So just make sure that there's some sort of feedback mechanism that you can share with the RPI judging panel. So on the TD side, just to give you a few examples, and Megan, you can go to the next slide. I've detailed here kind of some of the things that we articulated in the actual submission. Because for us, as I was mentioning, because we're such a large organization, governance does take a priority for us. And I can say from a global recognition team, we are responsible for overseeing all the enterprise-wide events. We don't run them all, but we have an oversight role because we run about, I can't remember the last count, but it was probably a good 10 to 15 recognition, like top performer recognition events in each line of business. So we do have, some pretty, strict, I would say, governance protocols, because we want to make sure at the end of the day that colleagues, no matter what business you're in, has a similar employee experience, right? And so, as I said, through COVID, because we had to pause a number of the events, and in some cases we had virtual events, and then last year we got kind of up and running in some of our programs, we had hybrid events. So what we had to go through a wholesome change in terms of relooking at policies and procedures around having the events. What happens if people don't show because they're scared to travel, and all of those kinds of fun things, which I'm sure many of you have had to deal with over the last few years, like TD. So just setting those up and setting up those policies and procedures and things that we took for granted in the past, we couldn't take for granted anymore. And then relooking at the standards of measurement, as I was mentioning, and looking at how are we going to engage our leaders differently, but still how important that is. And then we really look to, sharing with the RPI board that was reviewing, like really understanding that we do look at the quality improvement. To give you an example of one of our events, I mentioned here on the second slide, the second section of the enterprise-wide recognition events is we run what we call our Vision in Action event. And this event is really a career kind of lifestyle career moment, because only 1 out of 1,000 employees receive this award. And it's meant to be the best of the best awards. So we just reinitialized this program last year coming out of COVID, where we had 3 years of winners come together for a 4-day, 3-night recognition event in Toronto. And this is where all of our senior leaders across the bank come. And so we detailed in our submission, details around every day, the meticulous, planning and events and the budgets and feedback mechanisms that we had. So any advice I can give you is the more details you can be around the end-to-end again of having recognition events and celebrations, no matter how big or how small, will really help. The other thing that I also articulated in the submission is we have Employee Appreciation Week, and this happens for us in the month of June. I know other organizations, you may have Employee Appreciation Day, which was just in March. I think it was March 4th this year. Other organizations have it at different times during the year. So however you celebrate your employees, I would highly recommend that you just give details around those events, around all the key stakeholders, and ultimately what does it mean to your employees for organizations to show their appreciation and recognition. If you have any sort of quotes that you could provide in terms of employees, or any type of feedback that you've received or process improvements, share all of those details. And I would say, the last thing that TD provided at the very bottom of this slide is, I talked a little bit earlier about TD takes the opportunity where it makes sense to communicate and to celebrate externally with our customers. And we actually have what's called a TD Thank You campaign. And so this is a campaign that actually is a nomination-based process in which we try to shine light on, amazing contributions of our employees to customers in our communities. And so again, we take a storytelling approach, and we really thank through various events and celebrations, even within our external communities that we support, to provide gifts and to share our thank yous with them. So the next slide, I just wanted to share, these are just some of the logos of our various enterprise programs. And one of them at the bottom there is one of our many, as I said, 10 to 15 business specific recognition programs that we have in terms of celebration and events. So I hope that painted a good picture for everybody, but I know you'll need to tailor it for your organization. Kevin, back to you.
Thanks, Janet. Thanks, everyone. So, yeah, standard 7, the last of the 7 RPI best practice standards is about program change and flexibility. So successful programs are programs that are agile, that can flex and change as things change in the business. They're not rigid, but things do change. Obviously, priorities change, and the program needs to sort of follow with that. So continuous improvement for all programs is evidenced. So you know, to demonstrate or to achieve continuous improvement, you need to be measuring, as we talked about earlier, and that's important to drive the continuous improvement process. This willingness to adjust, you need to kind of demonstrate that in your submission, and give examples of where you've modified, removed programs potentially, where they no longer appropriate, or introduce new ones. So I think this is very much, this particular standard is very much about providing evidence of the flexibility you've demonstrated over the period with your program. You know, that whole aspect of getting feedback from participants. You know, if you're able to demonstrate that you've sought feedback, that you've been running pulse surveys, and that you've, or your annual employee engagement surveys, whatever they are, but that you've taken on board the feedback and that you have responded and you've refined your program, you know, all the evidence you can give around that is going to be important. And again, that you're continually checking to see that what you're doing is still aligned with your goals, with your business goals. So this is the standard, this submission, this particular piece is very much around providing evidence of how you're doing that. So Meg, if you don't mind just moving on, and here's just some collateral again, some examples of how we evidenced change and flexibility and agility in our own program. The little model on your left-hand side there is what we call our 9-box system, but it clearly identifies at the bottom of that process the feedback system. So the measurement, we've created our framework up front. We measure on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, how we're doing. We check in with our program champions, we check in with managers, and then we're able to make adjustments and refinements on the basis of that measurement. So measurement sort of underpins it all, but then some examples of where we did need to introduce change. Some of them were more simple than others. The first one, for example, was literally just changing the frequency of measurement. You know, we do reward people and recognize them for achieving business goals, but we were trying to measure too frequently on that. We needed some more time. So instead of monthly measurements, we moved it to quarterly. So just a very basic example of flexing, how we flexed the program to improve it. We needed to, at one point in the year last year, to really recognize our IT community. We were subject to quite a severe cyber security attack. And these guys honestly were absolutely incredible. They worked 24/7 for about 2 weeks to rectify the problem and resolve it. And we created an extra sort of category of recognition on our platform called Heroes, and people were able to recognize our IT guys for doing the job they did there. So that was another small example. And then finally, on the right-hand side of your slide there, we tracked very carefully how engaged people are. Our platform provides us with an awful lot of engagement data. And we could sense and see actually in the data a sort of a decline of engagement. So we introduced a competition for people to achieve various inputs and milestones, and then it's some sort of competitive price, and it re-stimulated the program. So look how we flexed and remained agile in our program. So again, just need to think about how you do that.
Okay, it seems like we've lost Kevin there. We'll do our best. I'll watch to get him back, but the following slide was just to show kind of some examples of the benefits of best practice awards and why you should nominate. So there you are, Kevin. We got you back.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, signal dropped there for me. Sorry. Yeah.
No problem. And was there anything else you wanted to add?
No, not really. I think the benefits of participating, are clear. It makes you think about best practice, number one. The best practice standards are very clearly defined by the RPI. They're all on the website, and that's a good place to start. Are we delivering best practice? And it's just about it just makes you think about it. And even if you don't achieve the standard, on your first pass, the feedback is so good that it gives you a lot of guidance in terms of where to go next. So don't feel disheartened if you don't get there on the first pass. Keep at it, and you will improve. And it is about continuous improvement. So now we got a lot of very valuable feedback, and found it very beneficial being part of the process.
And I'll jump in too to say TD was in the same boat. I think balancing the positive feedback with the room for improvement is always important. And, I just think from a community of practice perspective, it was so helpful to know that others, as part of the board of directors for RPI, took the time and energy to read through multiple submissions to provide this level of detailed feedback was truly amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, and then next we have our hold on, back up. Our Pamela Sabian Recognition Champion Award. Rachel, did you want to tell us a little bit more about this?
Yeah, I will. So we have the Recognition Champion Award in honor of Pamela Sabian. Was one of our founding members of RPI, and so this award is given to someone who really displays leadership in taking initiatives to spread the message of recognition throughout their organizations. They exhibit, passion in promoting the principles of recognition and overcoming obstacles, and they're really a champion for recognition and really commit to that life. So if you know of anybody that fits these criteria, you can also nominate them through the same platform. The criteria is also there as well.
Thank you. Next, we have a how to nominate tutorial video by Jenny Howard.
Hi everyone, my name is Howard with Recognition Professionals International, and today I'm going to be showing you how to submit nominations for the 2023 RPI Awards. Let's get started. First thing you're going to want to do is head to recognition.org and click Awards, and this is where you can learn about all our different award categories. that we have the Best Practice Standards and Recognition Champion Award that you're able to apply for or submit nominations. So once you're ready to nominate or apply, you can hit apply here, or you can hit nominate here. It doesn't matter. And if it's your first time nominating or the first time visiting summitawards.awardsplatform.com, you can go ahead and create an account. I will just log in. Okay, and once you're here and ready to nominate, you can click Start Entry. Then you can select your category. So for example, I will apply for the RPI Best Practice Standards Awards, and I will just name it a test. And I'll click Save and Next. All right, so for this award, you're gonna have to select which standards you'd like to apply for. If you'd like to apply for all 7, the RPI Pinnacle Award, you can click that, and then fill out all of this information. And once you've filled out all of the fields, click Save and Next. Fill out all of these fields. And you can upload additional information here and submit entry. Perfect, you are all ready to go. I'm going to return back to my entries. All right, and you can see that it was submitted, but you can go back and edit the information up until the nomination deadline. I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions, please email info@recognition.org. Good luck. Hi, everyone. My name is Jen.
All right, thanks Jenny for that awesome tutorial. We do want to remind everyone that the submission deadline, of course, is April 28th. That's going to come up so quick. This spring is flying by. And now we'd like to open it up for questions. So feel free to drop your question in the chat. Otherwise, you can go ahead and take yourself off mute and ask away.
One question you might have, and we can answer this kind of as a blanket, is how much information do you need to include into your nomination? And for that, we do have what is called the Goldilocks principle. So if everybody knows the fairy tale of Goldilocks, you know, she went and tried one bed, it was too hard, one bed too soft, and then one bed just right. You kind of want to have that principle when you are submitting your information. You want to have the right amount of information, the right examples for the standard that you're going for, and then the right digital attachments for that standard to really hit home with the judges.
Absolutely. Good point, Rachel. Let's see. It looks like Christina asked, is there a size limit on the submissions? So Christina, if you're still on, could you maybe verify? I think maybe Rachel's question answered that. Otherwise, are you asking how many submissions can you enter?
Oh, sorry, it was more of the size of the files. Is there like a megabyte maximum that we can put in? Just because if you have a lot of visuals, it takes up a lot of space, I guess, or the size gets a lot bigger.
I don't think there is a limit, but I can check on that. If there is, then you can always email us your files or send us it through WeTransfer. But yeah, if there is a size limit and it's not submitting, definitely just email us.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? We've got a few minutes.
I just want to say we are very excited to see your guys' nominations come through. Like Kevin said earlier, whether you win or lose, you get tons of feedback from all kinds of professionals in the field from different areas and from different perspectives. Some people may have absolutely no idea, you know, what kind of stuff you've done, so that way then they can give an honest opinion and really help you get that recognition program to a really good level of where you're going to achieve and ultimately prosper. So no one ever loses.
Absolutely. All right, folks, I'll keep an eye on the chat and feel free to cut me off, but I do have a few items to share with you before we hop off the call today. First, I just want to thank Kevin and Janet and congratulations on achieving the RPI Pinnacle Award again. We appreciate the great insights that you guys provided on today's call regarding your recognition programs. I also want to thank Rachel and Donna and Jenny for the work that they put in putting this presentation together. We really appreciate that as well. And just kind of, you know, explaining the importance and the benefits of these awards. So we want to thank everyone for attending today. We have more webinars coming up that we invite you to register for. Visit recognition.org for more information and to get registered. Award season is upon us. So we invite you and your company to apply for the RPI Best Practice Standards Awards for 2023. There's more information available on our website. And again, that deadline is April 28th. So be thinking about those. A reminder to our attendees to join RPI at the IMA Summit this coming July 17th through the 19th. It's in Boston, Massachusetts this year. There will be great content and networking for RPI folks. So make sure you get registered for that. At any time, if you have questions or if you need support, please reach out to us at info@recognition.org to get more involved in RPI. And I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. So unless anyone else has anything to add, I want to thank everyone again. And I hope you have a wonderful Monday.